Hello, and thanks for coming back. Welcome to video number 2. I was going to start this week on a paper prototype, but across the week I had a few people reach out and message me and say that they kind of liked that we're on this adventure together, and I agreed. So that's something that I decided I want to continue, and I thought that for the first few weeks, while I'm doing some research to get myself ready for a prototype, I would spend the time trying to catch up people who don't play card games or really any games at all on some common terminology within the genre. So the first thing I want to talk about is what's called a win condition, which is basically the conditions upon which a player wins the game or another player loses the game. So in Monopoly, the win condition is to bankrupt your opponents, and in Uno, it's to get 0 cards in your hand, and so on. So the reason I want to start with this is because it's kind of the first thing that anyone explains to you about a game when you ask them how to play. It's your end goal. It's the most important thing. If you don't know this, you can't win, you can't lose, you can't do anything. So I thought it'd be a really good idea to look into what some other popular card games are doing and talk about them and see what we can learn for our own game. The first win condition I want to talk about is health, which is a very standard mechanic. Health is generally a point value tied to a player, which determines how healthy they are. As soon as their health reaches 0, a player loses the game. This mechanic is not only used within card games, but in many different game genres because of just how easy and well known it is. One thing I've always felt about health, and especially in card games, is that while it's an important resource to keep an eye on, it's kind of just a binary win-loss state. If you never get hit again, having 1 health in a game like Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Hearthstone, or Legends of Runeterra, it's the same thing as having 40 or 50 or 1,000. So in a lot of ways, it kind of becomes a very bland mechanic, whether you're alive or you're not. And there's very little variance in how you play the game based on that. To players of those games, I do want to mention that I'm talking about this mechanic sort of in a vacuum, not talking about any other mechanics of those games at the same time, so just take it with a grain of salt. But due to that, I don't quite think health is the mechanic I'm going to go with, only because I'm aiming for something kind of dynamic that can shift the flow of gameplay in seconds. So the next win condition I want to talk about are something that I've nicknamed segments, which is when a player's health is split up into a small number of pieces. If you were to look at a game like the Pokemon trading card game or Cardfight Vanguard, you would notice this kind of mechanic. For example, in the Pokemon trading card game, each player is required to set aside 6 random cards from their deck face down at the beginning of the game. And they add 1 to their hand each time they knock out an opponent's Pokemon. These cards are known as prize cards, and a player wins after they take their final prize card. In Vanguard, these segments are known as damage, and when a player is damaged, they take 1 card from their deck and remove it from the game, essentially losing access to a card in their deck. This can occur 5 times until a player loses immediately upon taking the 6th damage. A large advantage to both of these win conditions is that they not only play a part in deciding the victor of the game, they play a part throughout the entirety of the game. So this means that a skilled player could take advantage of the game's mechanics in a way that health really doesn't allow for. So for example, in the Pokemon trading card game, if a player knew every single card in their deck and was somehow able to look through it mid-game, they could discern exactly which cards they're missing. Because they could say, I have 54 cards in my deck and 6 cards set aside. These 6 cards are missing from my deck, so they must be the cards in my prize cards. On the contrary, in Vanguard, if your opponent had damaged and lost access to an important card in their deck, you would be able to more effectively make decisions with the knowledge of which card they no longer have access to. And that's really helpful and can help you win games. So the biggest disadvantage, though, I would say to segments, would probably be the amount of time I just took to explain it to you. If you haven't played either of those games yet, Pokemon Trading Card Game or Cardfight Vanguard, you probably would not know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm I'm going to keep it simple. I'm not going to go further and explain, but basically it's pretty hard to teach players how to play your game, even with a tutorial, and even if they've been playing it for an hour, 2 hours, they might still have some sort of misconceptions about the way the rules work. So having to explain something like that, it's difficult, and it's a fiddly win condition, but it really allows the game to reward the players while they play during the game, and can shift the tide of a match for a skilled player if they know what they're doing and get information that they can use. So I think I probably will end up using segments as my win condition for my game, but I will try to make it as simple as I can, because I don't want it to be too difficult for new players, which every single person will be, including me. The final win condition I want to talk about is what I call board control, and this is actually best explained using chess as an example. In chess, players are given the same amount of pieces in the same orientation with a goal of trapping the opponent's king. To trap the king, they have to try and control the state of the board until they can go in for the win. If we look once again at the Pokemon trading card game, it actually also has a rule like this. If you manage to defeat every one of your opponent's Pokemon in play, you win the game. This can be done even if it's the first Pokemon you knock out, and therefore the first prize card you would have taken. But due to the nature of card games and random chance, you often aren't able to find exactly the cards you need right from the start of the game. So you actually see this rule decide the outcome of a game very often. So between these two examples, can you see the main difference? Basically, this kind of a win condition works really well in chess because players consistently start with the same level of opportunity to win the game, and it goes up and down as the turns play out. But in a card game, this kind of thing is very difficult to design for, and if players can't start the game on exactly equal footing, it's pretty unlikely for the disadvantaged player to come back and win. It does happen though, and that makes for some really excellent matches, but often it feels bad for someone more often than it feels good for anyone, which is why I don't plan to have this be an explicit win condition of the game, but to design cards that benefit this kind of play style, which is really popular in other games and generally known as playing a control deck. So, in the end, the win condition I want to include in the game is something like the segments proposed in the Pokemon trading card game and Cardfight Vanguard, since I personally find that style a little bit more interesting than health or board control. But I also want to make sure that while that's my main win condition, I support various styles of gameplay using the card designs I come up with later down the line. So if you made it this far, thanks very much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you next week where I plan to talk about resource advantage and tempo.